Hi guys, welcome back to the Creative Restoration channel. I'm Doug Giles. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a project. We're actually going to be making a belt for a fellow Allen Edmonds enthusiast. Now for those of you unfamiliar, there's a Facebook group called the Allen Edmonds Enthusiasts, of which I'm one of the moderators. Now the project, the belt that we're making today, is actually for one of the fellow moderators on the group, Preston. Now Preston has his own channel as well. It's called The Elegant Oxford. I'll provide the link down below and you guys can check out his channel as well. Now once Preston receives the belt, he's promised that he's going to do a review of the belt. I have no idea what he's going to say, and just because we're fellow moderators on the same group doesn't mean he's going to cut me a pass. So I'm anxious to see what his review is going to be, whether it's good or bad. I hope it's good. I think it'll be good. But stick around with me and watch how I go through the process of making it.
So here we are. We're starting off with some Horween Chromexcel. Now this is the navy blue Chromexcel, and Preston had actually requested that I do an 1.5-inch belt for him. So I cut it slightly, just ever so slightly smaller than 1.5 inches. Now I've got a special knife there. I don't remember the name of that knife, but I use it for all kinds of stuff. Everything from cutting leather to cutting rubber, and fantastic knife. But go through and cut out my 1.5-inch strip for the outside of the belt. Dust everything off, cut it out. And then after I get the top side of the belt cut out, I switch over and I use some, this is actually 4 to 5 ounce vegetable tan leather. Same knife, and I just go through and sharpen it a little bit, put a little bit of polishing paste on backside of a piece of leather and strop it back and forth, and man, that gets that gets it razor sharp. Love that knife. So after I've got my edge cleaned up there, I cut out oversize, give myself about, I don't know, 1/4 inch on either side. So I've got about 1/2 inch of waste when I go to cut out a belt. Finish cutting it. And that's my back side. That's actually going to be the liner. Now before I start gluing it, I always like to put down a bit of paper. That way I don't get glue all over my workbench or my cutting pads. So I'll lay it out face side down, get my glue out, and just start going to town gluing up. And I'm going to glue both sides. Now this is barge cement that I use. Don't know if you guys have seen it on any of my other videos that I've made, but I use barge cement, which is the same thing that a lot of cobblers use for doing shoes. And I do the back side of the liner, and I do the back side of the top leather as well. No need to sand or anything like that. It's pretty porous. The glue goes into it. And I actually thin my glue down a bit using, what is it I use? Acetone. Now, Barge makes a thinner for it. It's kind of expensive, but I just use acetone. Works great for me. So once I've got both sides glued and I've let them tack up, I turn around and press both sides together. And when both sides are together, I like getting out my piece of granite and a rubber mallet, and I flip it over and take my rubber mallet, and the back side I want to pound it down. And as Steve would tell you, Steve from Bedo's Leather, he'll tell you, you got to pound out those bubbles. Thankfully, I'm not gonna bore you guys with the entire process of that, and I'm definitely not going to subject you guys to lots and lots of pounding. So I put that away, square up my ends using a leather knife. Square up both ends, throw away the scrap, and then I'm going to take and just trim off that excess liner leather that I have. And obviously I'm abbreviating most of what I'm doing here. I mean, this would take an entire day. If I made a video of the entire process from absolute start to finish, it would take up the entire day. So obviously I'm just giving you guys the abbreviated versions. Now, I use various round things to get different shapes. I started off with this, and I think I did a little bit too much of a rounded edge for the tip of the belt. So I cut that out, and I just didn't like the way that it came out looking. So what I ended up doing was taking a ruler, taking my marks that I had made, and taking a ruler, line it back up, and then just cut it off straight on both sides. And then I rounded over the edges. So I cut that side, I cut the opposite side as well. And forgive my arm for being in the way there. But I just didn't like the way that rounded section came out at first. So I went back and I squared it, did the taper, and then rounded off the edges. Now the tool that you see me using there is actually called a Foredom, F-O-R-E-D-O-M, or F-O-R-E-D-O-M, and it's basically like a Dremel, except it's handheld, and you can't see the top end of it, the motor end of it, but I have a foot control that lets me control the speed at which I'm either sanding or doing the slicking of the edges on the leather. So, but like I said, I actually, that's a sanding drum that I'm using on there right now. And I'm rounding over the edges, all those sharp corners. And once I've got that done, I actually take the stitch groover, which is that right there, and I will run a stitch groove down the entire length of the belt. And that lets me know exactly where my stitch is going to lay out. It gives me a guide when I get to the sewing machine. So I set up the sewing machine, and I'm using a pretty heavy thread. Now this sewing machine that I use will actually sew up to 7/8 of an inch of vegetable tanned leather. It's a pretty heavy duty machine. That's like, I tell you, I would not want to get my finger in the way of it. So I hold my threads out of the way and start stitching. And again, I mean, watching somebody stitch leather like this is kind of like watching paint dry. It's boring. So we'll get a little bit of you watching me stitch this up. This is also, it's a walking foot machine. So it's fed from underneath and it's fed from the top. So once I've got the belt actually stitched up, the top and the bottom, I will come back with an edge beveler, which is that tool. And it cuts off a chamfer on the side of the leather. And I do both the top and the bottom because I want to give the top and the bottom a bit of a round over. It cuts it at a 45-degree angle. So we'll get the entire belt cut. We do the top side and the bottom side, and then I come back with roughly 100 grit sandpaper and level off the two. Now, this is actually an old printer's block that I bought off of eBay, and it's really cool. It says Mercury, and I guess a printer had used it to do a newspaper or something, but I found that these printer's blocks work beautifully as leather stamps. I like it. So I decided I was going to use some of those and press them out. And as you can see, it makes a really nice impression there. So I do that, and then I do my maker's mark. Now I actually have to redo my maker's mark. It was also another printer's block from back in the 1940s, 1950s, something like that. And it was made out of, the top part was made out of wood, just like that Mercury one was. And the wood was starting to delaminate, so I actually use, for the time being, I'm using a piece of stone, a piece of slate. And that's one of my next projects. I'm going to adhere that little printer's block onto that piece of slate, but it still works pretty good. And that's the name of my leather goods, is Double J Ranch. So once I've got that done, then I go in and I mark out my belt holes. That one didn't quite cut all the way through on the first one, so there we go. Get all 5 of them. And I set my camera up in a different spot so that my table wouldn't bounce around this time for you guys. So here we are back at the Fordham, and now we're going to slick out the edges, and it's pretty simple. Wet it down with some water and a sponge, and I actually have a slicker that is made out of rosewood. And as I press the pedal on the Fordham, it will go in and actually round over the edges. Not quite good enough, so we do it a little bit more. So we do that for the entire belt, and the edges come out nice and slick. And once that dries, we're ready to put the edge coat on the belt. I do the edge coating in 4 different stages. First, I'm going to take my dauber, and I actually singe it so that I get all of the little loose fibers, loose wool fibers. Smells like burnt hair. I burn it, knock off all of the little fuzz bits, and then I do my edge coating in 4 separate stages. I do the top left, top right, or top side left, top side right, flip it over. Once those dry, do the bottom side left, bottom side right. Now, this is the way I do my belts. I do a little bit different way of attaching the belts to attaching the buckle to the rest of the belt. Now you can see I'm using my cutoff piece, my remnant piece, to mark out exactly how wide I want it to be. And I am going to cut out a strip that is the exact same width as the rest of the belt. And once that is cut out, again, I use oddball shapes. In this case, I'm using, that's just a spool of embroidery thread. And I'm going to cut round the tip, make it come to a point. And then on the back of it, I'm going to take and use a smaller spool of thread and give it a little decoration. And as you can see, that's the way it came out. I guess you'd call that, what is that, a chevron shape? So my next step now is going to be to again use the edging tool to bevel the edges, and then I take my dividers and I mark out exactly where I want to put the screws that hold that piece onto the belt, the main body of the belt. So my dividers are set up for exactly the center of the width of that belt. once I've got those marked out, I will come back and punch out my holes. So I punch out the holes for what's called a Chicago screw. And if you're not familiar with what a Chicago screw is, here's a picture of it. It's a two-part screw that are used to put a lot of belts together. So I had put this belt together with 3 to begin with, and I just didn't quite like the way that it was secured. And I ended up putting 5 in. Now I'm coming back in and I'm putting my stitch groove so that I can know exactly where to stitch on this, because I want it to all look the same. And here it is without the keeper. And as you can see, I used a total of 5 screws, and this is the completed belt. It really came out nice, and I really hope Preston likes his belt. Now, if any of you guys have any projects that you want me to take a look at, or if you want to get me to do something, you can email me at doug@imperialarosia.com, and I'll be more than happy to take a look at what you've got. And as always, thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Look forward to seeing you on the next video.